Darling one, you were born from the sweetest love, cast from the fires of creation, burning bright into the making of your perfect constellations. Head high, my love, never let them diminish you. Stand tall in the power of your love. Break open to the thousands come before you, written in your heart with holy blood. Keep going, my love. Hold tight to the scripture of your inheritance, your dreams born from ancient stone. Weave your magic star of wisdom, breathing life into hollow bones. Courage, my love. Place pain upon your sacred altars. Grow seeds where life has become hopeless. Lend hands to those who fall and falter. Let love be life's greatest opus.
Welcome, beautiful souls. My name is Tara Brading, and I'm the creator of the Dreaming the Ancestors podcast series, where we talk about remembering and reclaiming ancestral stories, feminine wisdom, and earth magic. This is the 14th episode, and today I'm very excited to welcome Charlotte Pulver to the podcast. Charlotte is at the heart of things, a modern-day alchemist born into the Pulver lineage of apothecarists. She has a background in natural health care, specializing in women's healthcare, immune support, and mental health. Her love is rooted in making medicines for people, which she sells through Pulver's Apothecary. She's been hosting ceremonies and pilgrimages for many years around the world and helped co-found the Fellowship of the Spring, a group championing water guardianship in the British Isles. Her passion is in community regeneration, inspiring people to seek out their local springs and wells to restore and tend them, remembering we are all guardians of our waterways. I'm so honored to be here with you, Charlotte. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Tara, for inviting me to chat with you today. Thank you so much for this invitation.
Yeah, such an honor to be here with you. And as always, I want to invite us to close our eyes for a few moments. Those of you listening, I invite you to close your eyes as well. And I'd like us to imagine that we're having this conversation in the flesh, heart to heart, and we're sitting on the ground around a great fire. And I invite us to really feel the spirit of this ancestral fire at the heart of our conversation. And I invite us to feel that our ancestors are gathering around this fire with us. Throughout time, our ancestors have sat around the fire and shared stories and shared wisdom with each other. And so as we welcome in these ancestors, feeling the spirit of these ancestors around us, may we continue that tradition, that beautiful way of relating to each other. And I want to take this moment to honor some of my ancestors here at the beginning. I'd like to honor my wise and well ancestors from the lands we now call England. Honoring all of the wise grandmothers who tended to the land in sacred, heartfelt ways. Honoring the wise grandfathers of my lineage who hold the wisdom of the forest. And I'm especially feeling my ancestors today from the Isle of Wight, where I have a very strong paternal connection, feeling the spirit of the island and the waters that surround it. I'm also deeply feeling the sacred sites of England, feeling the spirit of Stonehenge here in our circle. And I'd like to really honor the land as ancestor, our first ancestor. Honoring all of the human and non-human kin who live on the lands called England, going back through time. And finally, honoring the ancestors of the land where I live, here in so-called Colorado, the ancestral lands of the Ute and Arapaho people. Deeply honoring the ancestors of this land, all of the human and non-human ancestors who dwell here, and the spirit of these lands. I feel honored to be a bridge between Turtle Island and the British Isles, really feeling this as my ancestral destiny. And so I honor my place in my lineage and give thanks. Thank you, ancestors, for all that you gift and all that you bring to my life.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you so much for inviting me to this ancestral hearth of belonging and sharing. I give thanks to all your ancestors that are present here today and joining with my ancestors. I feel particularly strongly my father's ancestors from both German and Scottish heritage, and the journey that they took over to Turtle Island in the 1600s and are very rooted in what we term today as America. For that is the lands I was born into and lived till I was 9 years old. So also giving thanks to my ancestors of river and stone in what we term today as Florida, and giving thanks to the Taino peoples of those lands. Giving thanks to my mother's lineage of the Welsh and the Irish in particular, who are very rooted in these lands. And giving thanks to the joining of both lineages and all that they have given me and continue to guide me on this path now and forevermore.
Thank you, love. Deeply honoring your ancestors and feeling the presence of them around this fire with us. The title of this episode is Alchemy, Folk Medicine, and Tending the Sacred Waters. And as we come into this conversation, I'm really feeling the ancestors around us. And it feels so important to remember that throughout most of human history, what we now call, quote, alternative medicine was actually the original medicine. And the wisdom of this medicine was held in the hands of community. When we look back at ancient archaeology, examples of broken bones that were mended shows us that people have been taking care of each other for a very, very long time. And it's only in the past 100 years or so that folk medicine has been taken out of the hands of the people and placed into the hands of institutions. Remembering the folk medicine of our heritage is such a powerful way to honor our ancestors and reweave threads of connection to the natural world. In the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, she shares that in some native languages, the term for plants translates to those who take care of us. So by reviving our relationship to plant allies and the spirit of the land in sacred and ceremonial ways, we can reclaim an important piece of our humanity and revive our long ancestral history of being in communion with earth-based medicines. So Charlotte, could you tell us a little bit about how you got started on your path as a modern-day alchemist, apothecarist, and ceremonialist? And in your bio, you mentioned that you come from a lineage of apothecarists, so I'd love to hear about that as well in your share.
In relation to the lineage bit, on my father's side, the name that I hold is Pulver. It's a Germanic name, and it's a trade name. A lot of the German names express a trade, or a place. And so, the word to pulverize, to ground to powder. It's a trade name for someone who's an apothecarist or an alchemist. And it's a very ancient pre-Roman name. So the mortar and pestle is a friend. And anyone who had a very specific trade, you would have above your shop a symbol which represented your trade. Apothecarists had a symbol of the unicorn, which would just hang above where you worked from. And so that's what people would look for when they're in like a busy marketplace. They would look for the symbols. And also symbols are very important as sort of guardians of that trade, Symbols are very important to our cultures and still are in different ways. And what happened was, in the Reformation, when the church was really starting to change, the witch trials were the actual worst in Germany. And people who were practicing apothecarists had a very specific knowledge to know how to make gunpowder, which during that time was very in demand. And they were given an ultimatum that to live, to be able to survive and not be like banished or killed, to survive, there needed to be a trade-off. And that was to trade the knowledge of knowing how to make gunpowder, which back then was actually very, very difficult to make and not very straightforward. But from that moment onwards, you will not be known for your trade of apothecarists, but you will be known as the gunpowder makers. As a very young child, I was like, what does our family name mean? And some of my family was saying, oh, we're the gunpowder makers. And I was just like, this doesn't make sense because there's a unicorn in our family crest on top of a bunch of herbs, you know? And so I then found this story out of what had happened during the Reformation. And then once we kind of all pieced it together, it felt like this massive healing. That's why I use with the products that I make the unicorn on my labels. And it's because it was always seen as the symbol of alchemy. And the medieval stories talk about unicorn and dips the horn into poison and transmutes it into medicine. So that is the sort of background on my father's line. And then on my mother's line, it's kind of still in the healing arts, but in a different lens. It's like 7 generations back as medics. So the men have always been doctors and the women have always been midwives. So in relation to also what happened on my father's side during the Reformation, it was so brutal. My dad's family then decided to travel to Turtle Island, what we term today as America. I left America when I was 9 because my parents separated and came to live in the UK with my mom, who's like Welsh and Irish. And you know, what we do when we're children, what comes to us naturally, is very indicative of like our strengths. And, you know, whatever we do when we play, you know, it shows us our most purest connection. I would just go off with the plants and just squeezing out the juice, then bottle this like floral juice from the plants in bottles and label them, telling people what they're good for. And then I would give them to people and with very clear instructions of what they had to do with them. And that's just what was in me. Even as a child, like if my friends were sick, I always just had this naturally caring attitude of how am I going to help them? What medicines do they need to take? You know what I mean? And then it hit me when I was 15 that I really wanted to follow this path. But it came through being a very normal teenager. My teenage years were in the 90s. And the rave scene, it was huge. And, you know, there's different chemical drugs, you know, people are sharing. And I learned very, very quickly that my body couldn't take these things, you know. But, you know, still was determined to rave. Being the willful teenager, I was like, I'm still going to rave. I love my community. I love my friends. I love this amazing music. But I'm going to just open my herb books and I'll figure it out and make my own euphoric medicines, you know, from the plants, which aren't going to make me feel worse for wear the next day and actually are very, should we say, nourishing for the nervous system. So from that moment onwards, I was just like, this stuff works, and you know, and giving it to friends, you know, and they're like, yeah, Charlotte, what are you doing? This works. Keep it up, you know. So like from that very willful teenage experience, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. So when I left school, I was very brave and decided I was going to find the teachers I wanted to study with. And if that meant going to the other side of the world, I would. And I did like very specific apprenticeships. And through my travels, I ended up in Tibet. And I think maybe I was just connecting with something very ancient. And in that moment, I was like, I want to study Tibetan medicine. So then I went ahead and found out how I could do that and like apprenticed with a teacher for 8 years. And I also met with a teacher and studied Mayan medicine for 5 years. So, you know, I was, should we say, studying within other cultures. But then something hit me when I was about 28 of like, it's really important to go back to my roots, my ancestral lineages. And I'm really, really grateful I did the 8-year traditional Tibetan medicine training, because when you start to understand alchemy, it's a universal medical system, but it's also a universal understanding of consciousness. And it wasn't you rooted in one place of the world. It had you in, say, many different centers. And one of those centers was the British Isles, as well as France, Spain, and Italy, and India, and Tibet, and Japan, and China, and of course, Egypt, and Iran, and Iraq, the Persian countries as well. And the beautiful thing about alchemy, it's really the merging of science, spirituality, and art. And why I say it's universal is because everyone, all these different cultures, they all agree on the same principles. So these maps of understanding reality and consciousness, and everyone within all these ancient cultures agrees on it. Everyone then follows the same maps. And so thankfully, due to the Tibetan medicine that I studied, which is basically one of the existing medical systems of alchemy in the world, I was able to then translate these European alchemical texts completely and understand what they meant, because it's been so hidden and sort of undercover for many various reasons. I was able to be like, I know how to translate this back to the European alchemical tongue and understanding it, and the way of diagnosing in Ayurveda and Tibetan medicine, and what we would term as European alchemical herbalism, or some people call it hermetic alchemy. It's all the same, So then I was able to just really sink into something which was very much naturally in my heritage. And, it's my greatest joy of being able to help people connect back to alchemy in the European traditions.
Wow, thank you, Charlotte. What a beautiful journey you've been on. And I can feel the power of that moment when you decided, okay, I need to take what I've learned and go back to my own heritage. I have the tools now to revive and remember what has been lost. And that beautiful piecing back together feels so potent and so powerful. And I love that you have this affinity for alchemy. And, many people don't know that Britain has a longstanding history of alchemy. And so I'd love for you to tell us a bit more about alchemy. You started talking about it, but I'd love for you to share more. And, the history of alchemy in the British Isles specifically.
We use it a lot, that word, alchemy. And collectively, we use it as a word of transformation. But it actually is a medical system. And behind the medical system is this art of understanding consciousness. So I'll put it into a nutshell of what it is. Alchemy is the understanding of how consciousness embodies into physical matter, and how that consciousness leaves physical matter and goes back to whence it came from. Okay. So in the Northern Hemisphere, especially in England, so in winter, all the trees are bare. But by June, everything is very full. The trees are very full. So that consciousness has embodied into physical matter in the natural world. And by this time, we're moving into Samhain. The physical matter, the consciousness is leaving. Physical matter is going back to the earth. Everything is decaying. And there's a release of consciousness and a recycling back, and it doesn't disappear. So it really is a study of that, but also we embody that in our own life cycle. And the understanding is everything's a mirror. What is within is without. So in relation to the British Isles, alchemy is very rooted in the UK. And the main centre of that actually is Glastonbury. We'd have records from the monks there from around 700, and how they embraced the system and knowledge of herbal alchemy into their daily lives and into the church and into their practices, distilling plants, fermenting things. They wrote this down, recorded it, but in the archaeological digs, they found a lot of the implements they would use in the monastic labs. And so it was very much accepted and practiced up until the 1500s. it kind of, should we say, started to get abolished and go underground. And that happened, with the Reformation and witch trials and stuff like that, and all the paranoia. But so, like, for Christianity to embrace it, it had to be very much already there, rooted in the landscape, the knowledge that the peoples were practicing. And the first, should we say, Christian church was a Celtic church where we had priests and priestesses, where the old gods were called upon as well as honoring of Jesus, you know what I mean? And common Christian rituals are based on alchemical equations. The coronation rite, which, was practiced, was it last year, with King Charles coming to the throne? That is an ancient alchemical equation. And actually it was invented by one of the first early monks, who was the abbot of Glastonbury, who is now termed as St. Dunstan. He was a practicing alchemist. And he kind of came up with the coronation ritual, which is completely based on alchemy.
Yes, thank you so much for that beautiful exploration. And though I think we often think of alchemy as being a field of study dominated by men in the British Isles, such as the priests you mentioned, may we remember that the healers, priestesses, wise women, druids, and midwives were also practicing alchemists in their understanding of life and death, cycle and season, spirit and matter. May we remember the ways in which these ancestral women tended the spirit of the land and the sacred waters and worked with the ancient sites in very ceremonial ways. I think as people with English heritage, we often forget that we come from a land that is very, very magical. And we forget that we have these vibrant earth-honoring traditions that are embedded into our lands and our culture. And you spoke to some of those threads as you were speaking about Glastonbury. So I would really love to hear about some of the sacred and ceremonial ways that you tend to the sacred sites in Britain and the spirit of the land there. Like, how do you honor the land? Like, what does that look like and feel like for you?
I think everyone naturally finds their home. So for me, it was with the waters, with the springs. A big chunk of my life was actually living in London, and it was very much a training ground for me about connecting to the natural elements and the waterways. And a lot of people don't think that within a city, if they're living in a city, that there might be ancient springs, or underground rivers. I would always go outside the city to go to the sacred sites, to go to Stonehenge, go to Avebury, or go and find springs, by looking at an ordnance survey map, like going, spring hunting. Until one day I was just looking at the sort of zip code, the postcode, to send like a letter to a friend who lived next to a church. And when I was on the website, I was reading up about the church, and it said it had an old spring in it. And that you could come and drink from it. And this was like, as far as churches go, very old. And I remember like going immediately to this spring and drinking from it and just having this light bulb moment. It's like, of course there's springs in the city. And then this light bulb moment of like, I need to find as many springs as possible. And in that searching, I mapped them out on the Google map, and then I could see all these springs were connected to the 21 underground rivers of London, which flow into the Thames. And it was through just doing that, it's helped me ground to place and belonging, being in the city and feeling balanced, because I know a lot of people live in cities. It takes a lot to feel grounded, not swayed by so much energy in the cities, And so once I knew where vast amount of springs were in London, I would travel to them and tend to the ones that I could see, where the water was coming out. But even if I couldn't see them, they were like under manholes or capped, knowing they were there and knowing which riverways they were connecting, I felt like I could connect to the consciousness of the spring and make prayers. So, this old natural thing that humans do, like making wishes at wells or springs. I was just finding myself being really creative. Like there's one spring on Hampstead Heath, which bubbles up as a spring, but then it forms into what we call the River Fleet in London. And it goes through quite an incredible journey through the city underground. So I would go and pray at the source, knowing that those prayers were carried down underground through the city, under the streets. So you could start to work the waters in a very interesting way. So for me, honoring the land really starts with the waters, because the waters are what feeds all of life, and when water's in its highest potential, highest love is to feed as much life as possible. And it's water's highest potential is to flow well, not to be dammed up or full of pollution. So the greatest thing you could do is really go to your local springs or waterways and just like unblock them, clean them up. And in doing so, you are helping, the element on earth to feed as much life as possible, Honoring our wells can be very physical, just very practical, cleaning them out. If there's any pollution going into them, doing what you can to change that around. Honoring them with gifts of beauty, as you would a beloved, a loved one, courting the wild, courting the elements of water. But also with pilgrimage and coming together in community to do these things during the honouring of the seasonal changes and the cycles of the equinoxes and the solstices and in between phases of the seasons, such as Beltane and Lammas and Imbolc and Samhain. When you get together in community and honour those times together, even if it's just a simple ceremony of going to your local well or going on a big pilgrimage together for the whole day, being with nature as those tide shifts can help you make sense of the shifts that you're connected to within yourself, of how it must feel as we're exiting winter and stepping more into the height of spring, when we do that and step over those thresholds in community. It's incredibly healing and fun as well.
Yes, so beautiful. I love that you shared some wisdom about the tradition of honoring the sacred wells. And this is truly such an ancient tradition in the lands that we now call England and across Britain as a whole and in Ireland as well. It's such a fundamental aspect of our heritage. And, people would, of course, go to the wells to be well. And there was so much folk medicine associated with the wells and going to the wells for healing. And sometimes there would be healing stones near the well. And so I really love that you brought in that tradition and the beauty of going in community and this being a community ritual. And that's part of the folk medicine, is that it's a tradition that belongs to everyone, right? And I loved hearing about your connection to the wells in London, because when we think about sacred sites in England, we think about Glastonbury, we think about Stonehenge and Avebury and these kinds of places, but we don't often think, oh, right, the sacred wells are everywhere. And we don't often think about sacred wells in cities and London especially. So that really was a beautiful reframing, even for me, to really think about how we have sacred sites everywhere, right? They're all over the landscape. And so we can be in connection wherever we are. And the waters, no matter where we live, whether you live on Turtle Island or elsewhere in the world, or you live in England, honoring the sacred waters in these ways is such a beautiful practice and can be done by everyone to feel a deeper sense of belonging. And in addition to your reverence for the waters, I know that you have a lot of beautiful connections and relations to the plant beings and plant medicine. And so my last question for you is about honoring the plant medicines and how there seems to be this really strong sort of movement of women who are wanting to connect with herbal medicine and folk medicine in these sacred ways. And so I'm curious to hear about your reflections on what it really means to walk a path of being in relationship with plant medicines, and why is that so important in our modern times as women?
So connecting to plants and wishing to make medicines with them can really, I feel, shift culture on such a profound level and help shift you as a woman in your being, in your body, and actually help you connect more deeply to your ancestors. So I'm going to explain what that means and may feel like or look like. So in the system of alchemy, the highest practice, the central highest practice, is knowing how to connect to the consciousness of that in which you're making medicines from. Connecting to the consciousness of plants is the highest practice of all. The ability to do that extends to all of creation. So like plants can be a gateway if you really start to feel very confident to connecting to the consciousness of plants. It then builds as a gateway to connect to the consciousness of all of nature, to the trees, to the rocks, to everything which is singing and breathing and living. It's a really profound thing, being able to connect to the consciousness of plants, and it's really simple. A lot of people come to me wanting to learn how to do that. And yeah, it is, like I said, it's the highest practice of alchemy, because when you're making a medicine, something very beautiful happens when your beautiful, incredible soul, which is completely unique, there's no one else like you on this planet, connects to the soul of, should we say, let's talk about the rose, connects to the consciousness of the rose. A beautiful union takes place. Your consciousness witnessing the consciousness of the rose, and actually the rose experiencing you, witnessing it with the full totality of your amazing soul. Something very beautiful happens. So you become completely infused with the consciousness of plants, and that naturally goes into the medicine that you're making with it. It's like chefs, when they're really connected to the ingredients of their food. Their energy is really infused in the food. It wakes up something else, something mysterious, something that money can't buy, it's profoundly healing, and you feel healed by that food that you eat, It's the same with medicines. It's also good to remember, as humans, especially in a culture of individualization, we have this yearning to be met and witnessed by our fellow kin, both human and of the natural world, that we have this longing. But it's not just us, I can tell you. It's like the plant kingdom has that exact longing of really longing and waiting for us to totally meet the plant kingdom and witness, and for the plant kingdom to be truly witnessed and beheld by us humans. So when we work with the plants and know how to connect to the consciousness of them and work with them in a relationship of reciprocity, we start to bring a reverence back to the land, and we start to realize we are guardians of this planet. We are in service to the earth, and the earth feels that and is able to rise up and meet us and guide us in our guardianship. When we start to open up our senses, we hold in our eyes, our ears, our nose, our taste and our touch, and our deeper sense, which is our intuition, our sixth sense, and perceive the plant kingdom and ask a simple question such as, what is your medicine? I'd like to get to know you. And receive that information with our senses, giving ourselves full permission not to edit ourselves, just to feel it in our body. Something very, very profound starts to happen. It starts to open a different level of our nervous system up, which is in the mid-cortex of our brain, which is often called the mammalian brain or the ancestral mind. So what happens is when we are used to using our senses, our mammalian ancestral mind is activated. And it's an older part of our brain. It's not the frontal cortex, which we are very actively used to using in our culture of solving problems, analyzing and stuff like that. But when we start to use our sensory awareness, our feeling body, it opens a different, older part of our minds, which opens up a knowledge of just knowing things. Okay, we just have this knowing in our bodies. And our culture doesn't ask us to use our senses to such a heightened level, because we don't have to. It's not part of our survival for most of us, that we don't need to go off and find our food every day or find the medicines for our own survival. And so as a result, we're really not in our sensory awareness to the best of our ability, but we do have this profound technology in our senses. And so when we start to use our senses, for example, with the plant kingdom, of connecting to the consciousness and, having these conversations, it starts, the more you start to activate your senses, like, exercising a muscle, the mid-cortex of your brain, as I said, starts to get activated, which is your ancestral mind, okay? You just know things. This information drops in from the inside out. It's on a whole different level. the more you do this work, you realize it's not just from you, it's from a whole line of people behind you, a whole line of knowledge. So a lot of people ask me, how can I connect to my ancestors, Charlotte? And I'm like, let's connect to the plants. It's an amazing gateway. Use your senses and get to use your senses to find out the information before you decide to read it in a book. Because in our culture, we're brought up in this culture where we're told to know something. We must be told it, we must be read it, or we must be told by a teacher. We're never inspired that we can feel that knowledge and that we have this amazing technology which we're born with. And I always say to people, go talk to the plants, feel them, and then read it in a book. And the more you do, you utilize your senses to talk to the plant kingdom or decide to take it to other aspects of nature, you start to go through a rewiring process, I find, of deep embodiment. And this connection to ancestors just naturally starts to appear in an embodied way in the body.
Yes, that is so beautifully expressed, Charlotte. As you know, I do a lot of teaching about ancestral connection, and I've never heard anyone say it the way that you just said it. And it's really profound because it is truly a rewiring in the brain. And I love the term you used, the ancestral brain, the ancestral mind, rather. And to feel that this is actually a muscle that we can build over time, it's just a really beautiful way to express what I have witnessed in myself and so many others over the years. So I'm deeply grateful for that beautiful explanation, and to feel that the plants and also the water and also, the bones and the trees and, these aspects of nature can open up these ancestral connections for us, which are so potent and so visceral within our lineage and within ourselves when we open up that doorway of connection. So yeah, thank you so much for that beautiful share and for all that you shared. And I really feel the power of the medicine you stand in and the way that you stand in it. And it's really beautiful and inspiring. So feeling really, really grateful for our conversation today, and would love to give you this opportunity to tell everyone where they can find you. So your website, your social media, and what have you, and any projects or things that you have coming up that you want people to know about.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation to chat with you, Tara. It's been an honor and delight to share in these ancestral ways together. So, as I just spoke about, my highest love is guiding people to connect to the consciousness of nature, be it, firstly with the plant kingdom. So I do teach medicine making days whereby I teach this practice, which is the most vital practice. And I advertise mostly on Instagram. So my Instagram ID is at pulvers.apothecary. That's PULVERS and then the word apothecary. That is the main place to find out what I'm up to, whether it's medicine making days, whether it's pilgrimages, or whether it's medicines that I'm making in the moment. You also can contact me directly via email, which is at pulvers.apothecary@gmail.com. So those are the two main places to find me. And coming up this year, the medicine making days and immersions that I'm doing with the plant and tree kingdom. One with the yew tree, which will be in November. And then I do a series of mistletoe medicine making days in December, and then in January 2025. And then we do seasonal pilgrimages. So we have a Samhain pilgrimage in East Sussex, and then we'll probably do a winter solstice pilgrimage to Stonehenge, and many pilgrimages throughout the year as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you so much. And I hope those of you listening will go and explore Charlotte's Instagram and her work and all that she has coming up. And as you can tell from this conversation, Charlotte really embodies this wisdom. She's also a true guardian of the land. I feel called to really say that. I really see this in you, Charlotte, in the way that you have set up the Fellowship of the Spring, which guards the waterways. And I also know that you've been really involved with the activism to protect Stonehenge. And this is such an important aspect of being a guardian of the land and making medicines and having that true relationship. So just want to honor all of that, Charlotte, because I really feel your integrity with the way that you hold this medicine and these teachings. So a big thank you. And finally, just want to honor our ancestors who we called in at the beginning, and inviting us to maybe close our eyes just for one more moment as we finish this conversation and reimagine ourselves around that fire, really feeling the presence of the ancestors and offering our deepest gratitude for these ancestral life ways, for these ways of being in relationship to the land. And may the ancestors, the wise and well ancestors, help us to remember these sacred ways of being in relationship, these ancestral ways of making medicines and being in a medicinal relation with the land. So thank you, beloved ancestors. Thank you all, and wishing you all so many blessings on your path.
You've been listening to Dreaming the Ancestors with Tara Brading. My passion is connecting women to the wisdom of their ancestors, specializing in ancestral feminine wisdom from Ireland and England. If you feel called to connect with your Irish ancestry in an embodied, spiritual, feminine way, I lovingly invite you to sign up for my free reclamation journey, which includes a 90-minute video to connect with your Irish ancestry and ancient heritage. And if you hear the call to connect with your English ancestry, I have a 3-hour introductory workshop called Women of the Wells. You can find these offerings at tara-wild.com/get started. To spell that out, that's TARA-WILD.com/get started.